Guys, Comic Boom here to review Doomsday Clock number 5. This story continues to build up. Doomsday Clock number 5 continues with the symbolism, but the story sort of becomes a little bit more focused on the individual characters here. In my view, this particular issue has less symbolism than the previous 4 issues, but it's building the story. This is a 12-issue story arc. We're 5 issues in. This story is a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more focused on the individual characters, but it's very interesting. Gary Frank continues to impress with his amazing art. It starts off with Ozymandias waking up in the hospital. If you recall, last issue it ended with him essentially escaping the clutches of the comedian. He was talking, Ozymandias was talking with Lex Luthor, and all of a sudden the comedian comes in, shoots Lex Luthor, and tries to kill Ozzy. And of course Ozzy jumps off the window, falls 20 stories, and manages to survive. Something which impresses the Doctor at the opening of this particular issue. What's rather curious here is that the doctors look him over this issue. The Doctor looks him over and checks him out, and apparently he's got some bruised ribs, and he's got a pulmonary I think he's got a pulmonary embolism, but essentially he's got a bruised lung. But one thing the doctors don't discover is that they don't discover his brain tumor, because they don't even though they seem to have done an x-ray of his head, they don't seem to notice the fact that he's got a brain tumor. So that's not noticed on this, or maybe that was just some symbolism played with by Gary Frank, the artist, because it's a beautiful opening page, 9-panel grid. Starts off showing the skull, the X-ray of the skull with his aneurysm, brain aneurysm, and then it's sort of that particular aneurysm eventually becomes the flashlight that the Doctor's using to look into Ozymandias' eyes to see if he's okay as he wakes up from his I'm assuming a coma. But in any event, it's a beautifully rendered page, and Ozymandias, of course, not surprisingly, he eventually escapes the hospital because he wants to go back. He wants to find Rorschack, he wants to find Mime and Marionette, and ultimately, of course, find Dr. Manhattan. But when he makes his way back to the Owl ship, he runs into Batman, because Batman's waiting for him in the Owl ship, and basically he basically introduces himself and makes it quite clear that he read Rorschach's journal. And a very interesting debate between Batman and Ozymandias ensues, because Ozymandias takes him up in the Owl ship, and they travel around Gotham City while riots are occurring, because the fallout from the so-called Superman theory has been sort of engulfing the planet and is really taking root in Gotham City. And as Gotham City is in chaos, we have the Mime and the Marionette looking for the Joker, and we have Johnny Thunder, who has traveled to Pittsburgh to visit the All-American Steel Factory, looking for Alan Scott Green Lantern's lantern. He runs into Saturn Girl and Rorschach, because last issue, if you recall, Rorschach and Saturn Girl escaped from Arkham Asylum, and things are really heating up here. Because remember that central mystery so far in the story is where is Dr. Manhattan? Where is Dr. Manhattan? Is he in the form of a particular former member of the Justice League? Is he Superman? Is he in the guise of another DC superhero or supervillain? We just don't know, but we're looking for him, and that's the central mystery here. And Ozymandias is looking for him. Nobody knows where he is, but one little tidbit of information here that was revealed is Lois Lane visits Lex Luthor, and she asks Lex Luthor, "Look, Luthor, are you the one responsible for spreading this conspiracy theory called the Superman theory?" And that Superman theory, conspiracy theory, basically says that, look, 98% of all superheroes are American, and therefore it's probably likely that the American government is responsible for creating all these superheroes, including Superman, and they're using these superheroes for their own nefarious state purposes. And this has caused a lot of international controversy, and other countries, like the country of Markovia, which is where Geoforce resides. He's the Prince of Markovia. He basically is, he's allied himself with Russia, and Russia's cut themselves off from the rest of the world, saying, look, we're not going to allow other metahumans, superpowered beings to come into Russia. Meanwhile, Black Adam gets involved, and he saves the life of Jack Ryder, formerly known as the Creeper, from being decapitated by a terrorist. And Black Adam in his country basically is opening up his borders and saying all metahumans are welcome to come and reside with me in my country, and I'll protect you. And so all this stuff's heating up worldwide, all because of this massive conspiracy theory that seems to be building. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor informs Lois Lane that the person who created the Superman theory, he doesn't know who it is, but he's got reason to believe it's a former member of the Justice League. And if it's a former member of the Justice League, you got to wonder, who could it be? I mean, I'm not really sure. It's anybody's guess at this point. I don't think we've got enough information. At least I don't think. If you guys know something or think you know something and I don't, please enlighten me in the comments below. Now, the title of this particular issue is There Is No God. And it's somewhat interesting because it starts off with the doctor who's treating Ozymandias talking about how the hallucinations that people have when they're dying, when they claim to see a light or they claim to have an afterlife experience, where it's really nothing but a bunch of synapses going off in their brain, and that it's not really a miracle, that basically there is no God. There's a perfectly logical scientific explanation for an afterlife experience. What's interesting about that is, if there is no God, that ties into the earlier themes we've been talking about in earlier issues about Dr. Manhattan, and even about that book that was on Clark Kent's bedside called Walden 2, about a world where they're essentially, people are basically controlled, but they don't realize they're being controlled by a higher government power, by a higher power. And so it makes you wonder, well, is there a God or isn't there? It's forces us as the reader to sort of question our beliefs and to reevaluate, you know, who's in control of everything. Is Dr. Manhattan the God of the DC universe? Has he actually orchestrated all of this? How did the rebirth DC universe come into existence? Does Dr. Manhattan have anything to do with that? And if so, where is he? Why is he still in hiding? And what does the Justice Society have to do with all this? And this is, and that ties into Johnny Thunder. Now, Johnny Thunder is 102 years old. As Johnny Thunder, he was a member of the Justice Society of America. But as we all know, in the Rebirth DC universe, there is no Justice Society. So where is the Justice Society? Where is it? Where are they? They seem to be hidden from history. Why would Dr. Manhattan, if he is responsible for what's going on, why would he hide the Justice Society from DC history? Why would he do that? What would be his motivation? And if he has hidden the Justice Society, it would appear that he's somewhat failed to be completely successful, because Johnny Thunder, who is now a 102-year-old man living in a nursing home in the Rebirth DC universe, and he's trying to find that tether. He's trying to find some connection to the Justice Society to sort of free them or to find them. And he sees in the newspaper that there was a fire of green flame at the All-American Steel Factory in Pittsburgh, and so he escapes from the nursing home and he manages to catch a bus to Pittsburgh, where he discovers Alan Scott's Green Lantern. And what's interesting, guys, I don't want you to confuse that Green Lantern with the Guardians of the Universe. This is a different lantern. It's a mystical lantern. The Green Lantern of the Justice Society is not the same as Hal Jordan and the members of the Green Lantern Corps. There is no Green Lantern Corps in the Justice for Alan Scott's Power Ring. Alan Scott's not a member of the Green Lantern Corps. Alan Scott's Power Ring, his lantern, is mystical in nature, and it's powerless against anything made of wood. And in any event, it's a mysterious sort of power base. But the bottom line is, why does his lantern still exist? How did it end up at the All-American Steel Factory? What's going on? And can this lantern be used to find the Justice Society? Now, in the middle of all this, we've got Saturn Girl. Now, if you're a call guy, Saturn Girl first showed up in the Rebirth universe in the Rebirth one-shot, where she was a smiling girl from the future, basically telling everyone, and with a beautiful smile, that everything's going to be all right. Well, here she shows up. Well, last issue she shows up. She reads Rorschach's mind, and the entire issue with it was essentially Saturn Girl essentially reading the mind of Rorschach to understand him, and she helps him escape Arkham Asylum, and they go looking and ultimately find Johnny Thunder, and he of course has the lantern. Now, and that's where that ends up, but you know, Saturn Girl seems to know what she's doing. At one point, Rorschach beats up a bunch of bums that were attacking Johnny Thunder, and he basically is killing them. But it doesn't seem to bother Saturn Girl because she's from the future, and apparently she knows that these bums were going to die of an overdose later anyway. So she seems extremely nonchalant about everything. She seems to have a quiet confidence about her that what's happening right now is exactly happening as it should, which is kind of interesting. Meanwhile, Ozymandias and Batman get into a heated debate and argument as they're going through Gotham City in the Owl ship. And Ozymandias seems to be on somewhat of a rant. He's sort of accusing, the phrase he uses, he basically accuses Batman of the heroes of the DC Universe as sort of engaging in an ineffectual, pageantry-obsessed cosplay, and that they're like pulp heroes, and they're almost too idealistic, and it's causing the destruction of their own world because they embrace too much idealism and they're not based in the real world. Meanwhile, Batman points out to Ozymandias, look, you destroyed your world. You did a terrible job. You manipulated your world. Your way led to the deaths. You orchestrated the deaths of millions of people, and for what? And it led to destruction. So what's wrong with our idealism? If we had to choose, I'd much rather take the idealism of the DC universe as opposed to the darkness of the Watchmen universe. And it's this idea of nihilism versus idealism. The nihilism of the Watchmen universe versus the idealism of the DC Rebirth universe. Which is better? It's not necessarily that one is necessarily better than the other. Just because something's darker doesn't mean that it's worse. I guess it all depends on individual choices. And what's interesting is that it's the choices that the heroes make in the Watchmen universe, particularly the choice that Ozymandias made in the Watchmen universe that led to its destruction. And it's the choices that the DC heroes make in the DC universe that can either make or break it as well. So again, also it's the choices and the differences between the Watchmen universe and the DC universe are really coming into play. And building on that theme, we have to wonder, what is Dr. Manhattan doing in the DC Rebirth universe? Why is he really there? Again, this is the central question, and I'm not really sure what the answer is, but the juxtaposition between darkness and light in this issue is obvious. And I gotta give full props to Gary Frank here, because at one point in the issue, you really see the difference. He juxtaposes the images of the bat signal being destroyed alongside the images of Johnny Thunder finding that green lantern. And it's really incredible. It's sort of like the image of finding the light and losing the light at the same time. It's like Johnny Thunder finds the light, and Batman's bat signal is extinguished and destroyed, so you lose the light. So we got these juxtapositions of good and bad, of light and darkness, and good guys and bad guys, and we're not really sure what to believe anymore. But we do know that the DC universe is slowly falling apart. It's slowly getting infected and poisoned by the darkness. And this issue ends with Batman being overrun by a crowd, and Batman's being discovered by Joker's henchmen, and Joker's henchmen take Batman to the Joker, who has finally confronted and met up with the Mime and Marionette. And the Joker's a little upset with the Mime and Marionette because they killed all the people in his bar, they killed all his henchmen last issue, and they're upset with the Joker because the Joker, apparently there was a rule that says if you go into the Joker's bar you can't wear makeup, and while the Mime and Marionette are a little crazy themselves. And so it's going to be interesting to see where that's going to go, because I don't really see the Joker and the Mime and Marionette playing into the larger narrative here, because they're just basically just crazy people, bad guys. What does that have to do with the larger issues at play here in this narrative? I don't know, but I am intrigued by it. Now, as in keeping with all the other things that have gone on in this series, at the back they have continue with their series of articles, and every issue, I've always said that in the last 4 issues at least, reading the back articles always gives you additional information as to the narrative. Basically what it does is that it basically gives the reader more information about all the various different heroes of the DC universe and how they're being influenced and how they're becoming part of the controversy surrounding the Superman theory. And it's well worth the read. It's particularly interesting, I think, with when it focuses on Black Adam. Is he a savior or a sinner? Again, Black Adam is offering asylum to his he runs the country of Kandak or Kondak, and he's offering asylum to all metahumans on the planet. Meanwhile, Russia wants to keep all metahumans out, and the United States, of course, is knee-deep in all of this and being accused by the world at large and by the United Nations of orchestrating the creation of metahumans in the first place. If I didn't know better, I would think that there might be some agenda on the part of the DC universe in general it's almost creating that hysteria that the Marvel universe has, that mutant hysteria, where in the Marvel universe, at least in the early years of the Marvel universe, there was a great deal of mutant hysteria. People were afraid of mutants. This is a little bit akin to that. It's like it's sort of building toward the idea that maybe all these superheroes, there's a conspiracy theory. All these superheroes are created by the U.S. government for nefarious purposes, and therefore it's trying to create fear of the superheroes, fear of Superman, fear of the Justice League, and it appears that a former member of the Justice League is leading the charge in creating this conspiracy theory. It's not Lex Luthor. So it might be somebody that might surprise us, but who could it be? Could it be Superman? Could Dr. Manhattan be Superman and spreading this? What about Martian Manhunter? I don't know, I'm just making that up. Could it be Wonder Woman? Spreading a lie as opposed to a truth? But why would she do that? Who in the former member of the Justice League would want to do that? Would it be an obscure former member of the Justice League? Who would it be? Could it be the Flash? Could it be Green Lantern, Hal Jordan Green Lantern? Who would it be? I just don't know. There's been so many members of the Justice League. We still need more information here. Guys, there's so much to digest here, and there's little continuity glitches that I find. This takes place apparently 1 year ahead of the rest of the DC universe, and by the time this has been delayed, and at the end of this issue, the article that is referenced at the end of this issue is dated May 30th, 2019. That's essentially 1 year from now. So it is a year ahead, but then also if it's 1 year ahead, Clark Lois makes a comment about, she gets upset with Perry White and says to Perry White that I'm upset that, is it too late to change the godfather of our son? Because Perry White's the godfather, and Clark says, yeah, we're 10 years too late. But I would think he means 11 years too late. Now, Clark's usually pretty precise. Jonathan would be 11 years old in this storyline, not 10. Minor little thing. I know I'm nitpicking there, but Jeff Johns usually is very precise when it comes to continuity. So it's interesting that all these references are made. Also, some of the references in the back here, some of these heroes seem to be, there's a reference to Killer Frost, and they refer to her as Dr. Louise Lincoln. And Killer Frost is a former enemy of Firestorm. But we have a different character called Caitlin, is Killer Frost in the pages of Justice League America. It's just in it. So this is a different Killer Frost. So I'm wondering, there seems to be a little bit of a mixture between pre-New 52 continuity and Rebirth continuity and New 52 continuity. So there's all kinds of things here that maybe slight inconsistencies, but it's not like Jeff Johns to have those inconsistencies. Again, I'm really nitpicking here, but something's happening. I'm not really sure what it is. If you just focus on the surface level story here, this is a good story. If you just stay at the surface, this is a good story of Ozymandias with the Mime and Marionette and Rorschach essentially looking for Dr. Manhattan to try to bring back to the Watchmen universe, to save the Watchmen universe, and probably along the way have something to say about the DC Rebirth universe as well. That's the surface level story. That's all you really need to know to enjoy it. But there's so much more deeper if you go if you go with those themes. You can watch my previous videos. I go in depth on what they are. And so there's a lot going on here. The mystery builds. Until next time, Comic Boom out.